You are now listening to the Box Seat Boys podcast.
What's up, guys? It's Josh back with another episode of the Boxy Boys podcast, and the playoff is all set. The college football playoffs, the 4 teams are set in stone. We got our answer on Sunday, who was going to be in, who was out. The big thing was, who was that 4th team? Who is that 4th team? So let's get right into the headlines. We'll break that down and much more in the headlines section.
Boxy Boys Sports Headlines.
Like I said, though, the playoff. We have Clemson, Oklahoma, Georgia, and that 4th team, Alabama. Alabama got in. The Crimson Tide got in over Ohio State, who a lot of people thought were the most deserving of the 4th team, I should say. And then others also talked about USC. My big debate in my head, did the committee get it right? There's all kinds of, I guess, criticism from people. What does the committee look at? Do they look at resume? Do they look at conference championships, overall record? Is it a combination? There hasn't been much consistency. So I thought Alabama was done. I thought Alabama didn't have a shot. And here's why. So they had a couple key wins, but no huge wins. The Florida State ended up being a flop. Now, there were some analysts that said, listen, if Florida State had Francois, who's the quarterback that got hurt in that Alabama game, Florida State was number 3 in the country, potentially could have been a 10-11 win team, but you can't predict that. So they come out, I don't even know what their record was. Wasn't very good. Unranked. I think they're at least bowl eligible, but barely. So that win doesn't look good. Mississippi State, they struggled. That was what you consider a struggle win. LSU, okay, good win. Not overly ranked or anything like that, not a top 10 team or anything crazy. Their only opportunity to show how good they were, they lost by 12 points to Auburn, who is now a 3-loss team because they lost in the SEC championship to Georgia. So a lot of people were saying, Alabama, yeah, they beat up on the teams they should beat up on, but when they played Mississippi State, and which they struggled pretty much the whole month of November. They lose the last game of the season, don't even make it to their conference championship, and they still get in. Whereas Ohio State won the Big Ten championship, knocking off an undefeated Wisconsin team. I understand why there is that bitterness from Ohio State fans. But here's what I will say. You can't lose to Iowa by 31 points. You can't. I can't think of any scenario where Alabama, regardless of who is on their schedule, that they lose by 31 points. Iowa is a 7-5 team, and they got embarrassed. That, to me, if I'm on the committee, and they did say this, that's the key difference. Because Alabama lost to a top tier team. I still consider Auburn a top tier team, especially when they're at home. Ohio State lost to Oklahoma, who is now the second best team in the country, the best offense in the country. So that glaring difference is Ohio State lost to Iowa. It can't happen. It cannot happen. If that's washed out, Ohio State is in. The other team that people were talking about is USC, which I thought USC should have had a better chance than Ohio State to get in. Just by resume, same number of losses, they won their conference. But nobody really wanted to talk about them. So that leads me to my next question, really. Should we go to an 18 playoff? I think about it, and if we did that, we would have these 4 teams. Ohio State would be in. They were 5. Wisconsin would be in. They were 6. USC would probably be in because they're 7. I don't know who would be 8. There's a bunch of teams out there. I would throw UCF in there at this point. They finished the season undefeated, the only one in FBS that went undefeated. Consider throwing them in. How I would do it is you have the Power 5. Those conference champions get in. And then you have 3 wild cards. That just seems like the best. Now there's always going to be, team number 9 and 10 that said, hey, we didn't win our conference championship, but we deserve, one of those 3 wild card spots, but we got left out. It's going to happen no matter what. It's going to happen. We have, 68 teams in college basketball. The teams that are on the bubble and get left out, sometimes they feel like they should be teams 69 and 70 feel like they should be in. So it doesn't matter how many teams there are. There's no right answer, honestly. But I think the top 8 might be the best way to go in this sense, just because I do think Ohio State is one of the best teams. I do think that Auburn is a very good team. I would love to see a team like UCF, who went undefeated, get a shot. Yeah, they weren't an SEC team or anything like that, but let them prove. Now they're going to play a tough bowl game. I believe they have Auburn in their bowl game, but give them an opportunity. Apparently it's up to the Power 5. I don't know exactly how it works. But from what I've heard, the Power 5 commissioners and board of the Power 5 conferences are, at least 3 of them are completely against going to 8 teams. Now that was before we even had this whole scenario go down on Sunday. So, maybe the Big Ten was against it. They might be open to it now because they would have 2 teams in the top 8 if it was 8 teams. So they might be, on board. I would imagine the SEC, maybe the ACC is against it just because they have, the SEC has 2 teams in it. Clemson's always going to be in it, or the ACC champions most likely going to be in it. I shouldn't say Clemson's always going to be in. But seriously, there's always going to be a question of, did the right teams get in? I understand where they have questions about Alabama and Ohio State. If I were to watch Ohio State play Alabama, and I'm sure Vegas would feel the same way, and I'm sure everyone but Ohio State fans would feel the same way, I would probably take Alabama. I mean, most instances, obviously Alabama's a little banged up. They're probably going to get most of their linebackers and injured players back in the next 3 weeks before the first playoff game. I would pick them healthy over a healthy Ohio State team. So I think they got it right. I have said it before. I think Clemson is the best overall team. So I do agree with them being number 1. I think Oklahoma is the best offense. Georgia they impressed me in their SEC title game. Now, the team they played in Auburn was a very different Auburn team than they saw the first time, and the team that Alabama saw. The running back, for the life of me, I can't remember his name right now, for Auburn, was banged up, didn't look himself. Georgia was able to run the ball this time. It looked like a different Auburn team. So I'm not sold on Georgia's really that good, and the first time was a fluke. Kirby Smart is an amazing defensive coordinator, and now as a head coach, he was able to, watch the film of the first game, see what happened with the Alabama game, and make those adjustments. So it's going to be a tough test to see what Georgia has to deal with Baker Mayfield and them. So I do think the four best teams, I do think they got that right. So the first game, the playoff games are January 1st. So, we're still a few weeks away from that. Bowl season starts next Saturday. So obviously next week I'll have the pick'ems for that. But I'm telling you, I think this is the first year. Now it's only, year 4, year whatever. This is the first year that I look at the matchups and it could go either way. Last year, Clemson, they blew out Ohio State, and I expected that. When Alabama played Michigan State, they blew them out. I expected that. I don't expect any of these teams to get blown out. Now, I think the best opportunity for a blowout would be Clemson and Alabama. Honestly, if Alabama's not healthy and they play like they did Mississippi State and Auburn, Clemson's going to just walk all over them. But I think Alabama's going to be ready to go. So I'm super excited for these playoffs. I cannot wait for them. The teams that are kind of on that outside looking in now, their season's either wrapped up or they're getting ready for their bowl game, which is going to be in the next couple weeks leading up to the playoff. Some coaching moves still going on. One of the surprising ones, obviously, Sumlin left Texas A&M, got fired. He is in talks right now with UCF after their coach Frost went to Nebraska. He led them to a great season, a great win. He apparently accepted the job there. Texas A&M is now going to be Jimbo Fisher is now going to be the head coach for Texas A&M, which really surprised me that he left Florida State. He had a really good thing going with Florida State. They have been average the last few years. They were number 3 this year, obviously plagued by injury this year. They had a down year, but he does have that national championship a few years ago. So Texas A&M, they locked him up 10 years, $75 million. 10 years, $75 million. That is straight cash, homie. That is straight cash. 10 years. After this contract, he can just, he can retire now, but that is some cake that he's going to be paid. Herm Edwards going to get back in the coaching realm, the coaching lifestyle, as he is now the head coach at Arizona State. Herm's been away from football for a little while now, away from college football for a while. So interesting to see how he's going to adjust. I had a feeling he was going to come back to the college ranks. I thought it was going to be in the NFL, but Arizona State, took a shot and, they caught Herm. So that's going to work out nice for them. Oregon's Coach Willie, Florida native, is going to Florida State. He spent one season at Oregon. And he said the opportunity is just too good to pass up. He grew up a Florida State fan. It's too, he's going to go home. He's going to coach, his favorite team. It's like a dream for this guy, and I don't blame him for going there. Oregon had an okay season. I'll tell you one thing, though. UCLA is lucky that they got their man, Chip Kelly, before this news broke, because I had a feeling if this would have broke beforehand, Chip Kelly would be on his way to Oregon right now instead of UCLA. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what's going on with Tennessee. Haven't looked into it. I know they fired their athletic director and well, they didn't fire him. I guess he's on paid leave, quote unquote paid leave. Old football coach for the Volunteers is now acting AD and helping find the new coach. There's still rumors floating around. I haven't seen any news. I'm sure there's something out there lingering. But until I see an announcement, I don't really know what's going on with their job. Little Heisman news. Kind of surprising, honestly, for me. Heisman finalists were announced. The three going to New York are Baker Mayfield, Bryce Love, and the third guy is kind of what threw me for a loop here, Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson, who was last year's winner. If you look at his numbers, they're pretty similar to last year. But when you win the Heisman, they expect you to get better. You kind of have that, unfair, watchful eye on you to what you're going to do this year. What surprised me is Lamar Jackson got invited, but not Barkley. Saquon Barkley, I expected to go. Obviously, towards the end of the season, he got a little quieter. Sam Darnold also not on that list, who was, I believe in the beginning of the year, he was the favorite to win it. I still think Baker Mayfield is my number one guy. That's Vegas's number one guy. That's most people's number one guy. All the, crotch grabbing, flipping people off aside, he's the Heisman of college football. I mean, he is unbelievable. I don't know what it's going to translate to in the NFL. I don't know if his antics are going to hurt his draft stock, but the one thing I do know is he is 100% deserving of the Heisman Trophy based on his play. So Heisman finalist, that gets announced next week, I believe. I don't think it's this week. Either way, he's got a busy week ahead of him anyway. He's got to travel to a bunch of different award shows and all that stuff, or not award shows, but award ceremonies and everything like that. So Baker's going to be busy leading up to the playoff. I expect him to do well in the playoff as well. But he's definitely my front runner. I don't know what the odds are for him anymore, but they were, like I said, minus 2,000, which was the same Lamar Jackson was at the time last year. So it was, I would almost say it's pretty much set in stone. If he doesn't win, I would call it a huge upset. Just because Bryce Love, the way I would rank them is Baker Mayfield, number one, and then a very far second, Bryce Love, and then third, Lamar Jackson. I think the gap between Baker Mayfield and Bryce Love is a lot larger than Bryce Love and Lamar Jackson. That's how much of a lead I think Baker has on this. Some college basketball, I guess news. I don't know. I don't even know what to call this. LeVar Ball is taking his son, LeAnthony, out of UCLA. Just, you're done. We're done here. We're going to focus on the NBA. And LeVar said, I'm not sure what team I want him to go to yet. Like it's his decision. You know what? I'm all for, it didn't bother me when he was promoting Lonzo and everything like that. Like, yes, it's annoying. Yes, he's over the top. But what he was trying, he didn't do it well, but he was trying to help his kid out. He takes LaMelo out of high school. He takes Anthony out of UCLA to focus on the NBA. Now there's talks of them going international and playing. I don't agree, because now it's not in benefit. Like, he might think it is to go to get ready for the NBA, but man, education is more important, and especially in Anthony's case. So, in case you're not aware of the situation, from how I understand it, Lonzo got a scholarship. UCLA wanted Lonzo. 99% sure they at least were going to want LaMelo. I mean, he's progressively, I think he's going to be better than Lonzo, especially scoring wise. I mean, that's not hard to do. But LeAnthony was not that basketball player. They weren't sold on him. So LeVar said, if you want Lonzo and you're going to want LaMelo, you got to take the middle brother. He's got to have a scholarship too. And UCLA said, done. So I'm not saying he's a bad basketball player, but it's not like UCLA was like knocking on his door. You got to come here. He's not that type of talent. So to take him out of school to focus on the NBA when he's not guaranteed to go to the NBA is mind-blowing. I'm sure there's something happened with the coaches and Anthony wasn't going to be playing, or maybe he was going to be out indefinitely because of the whole thing in China. I don't know the whole story. All I know is LeVar Ball is doing more harm to his kids than helping them now at this point. And somebody has got to do something. His wife, somebody has got to step in and say, listen, you're hurting your kids now. So, I don't know. We'll see if I don't know if it's actually happened or if it's just talks, but we'll see how that kind of goes down in the future. Other college basketball news talk. Roy Williams, UNC coach, said something that I can kind of get behind. It would be a little bit more difficult it's a little bit more difficult than actually enforcing it, but I like the idea. Roy Williams said, with all the scandals and rule breaking and all that stuff that's going on, if you break the law, like not the law, like don't be murdering people anyway, but if you break NCAA rules and you know that it's intentionally wrong, like compliance stuff, recruiting, getting escorts for your players, recruits, stuff like that, they should be banned from the NCAA. And I can get behind that because there's a lot going on. We see it with paying players, paying recruits, the whole Adidas thing now, the escort situation at Louisville. It's just, there's a line, and now it's getting it's getting crossed. Here's my issue. If this were to start becoming a thing where, okay, if we find this out, you're going to be banned, the NCAA would have a lot of issues with uncovering things. Like, in my honest opinion, I think a lot of the NCAA would be banned. I don't know a number. I don't know a percentage. But from my experiences as a college athlete, stories I've heard from other college athletes, there are rules that are broken. Recruiting, practice time. I mean, there's obviously some are more serious than others, so there would have to be some sort of line there. Obviously, practicing an hour longer than you're supposed to for the week, as opposed to paying recruits to come, is different. And there's a line that obviously we're not going to ban people for certain things, but rules in the NCAA are broken by, I would say, more than half of the coaches and staff for college teams. That doesn't mean they're all paying recruits and everything like that, but NCAA rules, if he means all rules, I would say Roy's probably broken a rule or two. So where would that line be? What is that? Is it recruiting violations or what is it? If it's recruiting violations, I understand that, because you're throwing money, you're throwing whatever you can at these 17-year-old kids, sometimes younger, to come to your school. That's a huge decision. Now you're trying to, manipulate and influence them. That's a whole nother issue than, hey coach, we practiced 45 minutes longer this week than we were supposed to. You're banned from the NCAA. That's a huge difference. So I can get behind it. I don't think it'll ever happen, honestly, because I don't think the NCAA wants to open that can of worms. But it does bring up an interesting point, and if it does get traction, I'm interested to see where that line is drawn. That I guess that's the best way to put it. Baseball. So the Japanese Babe Ruth has narrowed it down to 7 teams. 7 teams. So he told the Yankees, great presentation. Great presentation. You're not a West Coast team and you're not a small market team, so not going to happen. Which if I was a front office guy, that would kind of irk me. Like, dude, you knew where we were located. You knew we were in New York. We're not a small market team. Why are you yanking our chain? We got other things to worry about. But anyway, he narrowed it down to 7 teams. Pretty much most of them are West Coast. And I would say a couple of them aren't small cap or small market. But anyway, they are the Dodgers, clearly not small market, but definitely West Coast. The Angels, the Padres, the Mariners, the Giants, the Rangers, and then the Cubs. So the Mariners and the Giants are reportedly the favorites. I would say probably the Giants are, if they get this fella and they get Giancarlo, wow, that they'll be doing some big things next year after a down season. But apparently the Rangers, who haven't been, they're reported as one of the 7 teams, not one of the favorites. They seem pretty confident that they're going to get this guy. So I don't know when he expects to make his decision, but those are the 7 teams that he is the most interested in. I know he definitely said no to the Yankees and the Red Sox, like 100% not going there. So I guess the other teams are open, but these are the 7 teams that are the favorites anyway. Giancarlo. So I heard a report that the deal could be finalized in the coming days. I also heard there's still some ground to be covered. So I don't really know. Obviously, the media is the media. From what I have read, I think the deal is closer than people are leading on to. So some people might say, hey, we're still pretty far. I think the reason that people think that it's so far away is because Stanton has that no trade clause. The framework for both the trades to the Giants and the Cardinals, who are the 2 front runners, are set. They have the framework for the deal set in stone. Well, not set in stone, but set up for both teams. Apparently, the Marlins were ready to just accept the Giants' offer for Bede, Shaw, Joe Panic, and if the Giants accepted to eat $250 million of the Stanton contract, Like they were ready to go. Stanton just needs to, waive the no trade clause, and I think that's where he's going to end up. If he waives that no trade clause, which seems like the Giants are his number one choice, so he would waive it there. It looks to me as everything, the cards are all set and everything's lining up. It's just a formality now of when it's going to happen. I would say in the coming days, maybe the next week or two, the deal could be finalized. There's always going to be complications. I'm sure there's negotiating on how much. I'm sure they have the pieces set. Now, the big thing is how much are the Giants willing to take of that contract? Obviously the Marlins would want them to take everything, but if they can settle for $250 million, then they'll accept that. I'm sure the Giants are trying to get that number down. But if it comes to, hey, this is if it's a few $1,000,000 keeping us apart, I wouldn't be surprised if they did take that, eat that part of the contract, in hopes that he opts out. He has I forget what year, 2020 or 2021, maybe he has the player option, hoping that he opts out either to restructure the deal or go somewhere else. He'll be a little bit older, so, won't be as valuable, instead of getting stuck with him for, 11 years or so because of the decline. So I expect that deal to be done relatively soon just because of everything that I've seen. I mean, like I said, the framework for the deal is done. Now we're just probably negotiating how much we're going to take of that contract on our books as Giants front office. So you might see that deal get done I hope in the next few days for the Giants. I mean, that's going to be a really huge signing for them after a slow year. Other than that, for baseball, I mean, the Yankees signed their new manager, Aaron Boone, 44 years old, 0 managing or coaching experience, but he's been, an analyst for ESPN. He does have a great baseball mind. He's been around the game forever. Obviously, he retired in 2009. Here's another example of a younger manager, guys that can build relationships, relate to the players, little bit, like I said, more relatable. So he retired in 8 years ago, going on 9 years. That's something that he can relate to. Like, the game has changed a little bit, but it's not like hiring, a guy that played in the 70s, that it's much different now. So getting someone that can relate to it, the younger generation, you see a lot of teams doing that, like the Red Sox did it and stuff like that. So I think it's a great signing. Aaron Boone, when he was playing for the Yankees, crushed my soul a couple times more. Like 2003 was the worst. But I think it's a great hiring for the Yankees, and I think he's going to do great things. He has the ability to really coach and build the knowledge of the game for these younger guys. And I think that's a great tool to have as a manager, not just, hey, this guy's going to pinch hit here. You got to build those relationships and build that trust with your players so they go out there and play for you. I think that goes a long way. NFL, Gronk, suspended for 1 game. His appeal was denied. Listen, I completely agree with it. I mean, I'm not going to touch on it too much. Here's what I will say. If a guy's laying down, defenseless, plays over, I don't care what his reasoning was. You don't just, I don't even know what he wound up, and it was an awkward, fall almost, but with force. You know what I mean? It was so weird. He said it was because he was frustrated with the refs. I don't care what the reasoning is. You just don't do it. You do not do that. There's no place in the game for it. There's no, and he even said it's not how he conducts or, holds himself. He doesn't, play like that, and there's no room for it. Well, it's all great and well that you said that. You just can't do it now. Just stop. Just don't do it again. You get suspended for one game. Just don't do it again. And I don't even know why he would appeal it, because it just served the one game. Come back next, week 15 for the Steelers, and we'll be good. That's all we got to worry about. Juju and George Ioka both also received a game suspension. Obviously, Juju Smith-Schuster on the Vontaze Burfict block. And then Ioka when he hit Antonio Brown. The way that the letter was written to them from the NFL was both of them were considered defenseless players. The blow to the head and the neck area is obviously unnecessary, and the NFL is trying to weed out those type of hits. That's why they're getting the suspension, which makes perfect sense. If you're trying to do that, you got to start handing out suspensions and everything like that. So completely expected some sort of punishment, either a fine or a suspension. I think suspension's way worse. So I completely agree with those as well. Obviously, it's tough to, when you're in the game like that, there's some that are, I guess, harder to stop. Like Juju was just trying to throw a block. It was considered malicious to some. If you ever played football, things like that happened. And back in the 90s and stuff like that, that was considered a phenomenal block, and people would be watching it on, the highlights. Or now, if it was still acceptable, this would be something that would be on YouTube all over the place, and still probably will be, just because that gets people that are, excited to the hard hitting and everything. But we're trying, it's player safety they're worried about now, so the suspension came down. Ryan Shazier, super, super scary injury. He's showing positive signs. If you watch the game, he hits him, he falls to the ground holding his back, and, his legs kind of look floppy, flimsy. Like, he did say that he lost feeling, or they were tingling in his legs after the hit. It's back injury. It's just one of those things where, he dropped his head, and, it was a little bit of they say it could be, just a spinal contusion. But they're going to evaluate him some more. They said the next 24 to 48 hours are crucial to his, immediate recovery. No surgery is going to be required, but he does have movement now, in those arms and legs. So obviously, huge positive news, not only for, the Steelers, but, for Ryan Shazier and his family and friends and everything like that, because it was definitely scary when it happened. But, obviously prayers and thoughts are out to him and a speedy recovery, because you never want anyone to go down like that. McAdoo for the Giants was finally fired. Finally. I do have a problem with it. Not that he was fired, but that, they fired him now. So here's why, here's my problem with it. The front office didn't agree with how the Eli situation was handled, and then that was verbalized. We didn't agree how you benched Eli, how it was handled, all that. So they fired him. They fired the general manager. The owner came out and said, hey, it wasn't just the Eli thing, but when you're 2-10, that's unacceptable. Here's my thing. What happened to waiting and seeing the whole season as a whole? The whole 2017 season as a whole. That was, 2 weeks ago? So, it wasn't the Eli thing now. Remember, it wasn't that one thing. But 2 weeks ago, you guys were 2-8, or whatever. That was acceptable. But now that you lost 2 more games, can't have it. We can't wait till the end of the season. So obviously the Eli thing had a huge impact because he's going to be starting this week. I don't know why they thought that either McAdoo or whoever made the call that was going to be the right answer. I mean, Geno Smith didn't play bad, but it's not going to turn the season around. So McAdoo's out. The franchise to me is just something's weird where obviously they're kind of going back on what they said. Like, we're going to wait till the end of the season. 2 weeks later, you're fired. So something in that front office and that coaching staff, something didn't align, and there's probably a lot of frustration and tension in the last 2 weeks. And then the Eli thing just, like a rubber band, it just snapped and just everything just went everywhere. So he's out. Eli, like I said, Eli's starting. It's not like the Giants are going to come back and, there's only 4 games left, so it's not like they're going to make the playoffs, but, they're not going to go 6-10 even. So regardless of what happens, of if you fired him now or waited, the season's not going to turn around. So, like I said, I would have fired him before the bye week, but they waited. They decided to wait a little bit, and now, the team's still in shambles. So let's see how the dumpster fire of the New York Giants works out the rest of the season. So let's move on to against the spread a little bit.
You covered, yes, it's good!
Are you sure what's the final score?
Miami by 4! You covered 12!
I covered!
Yes!
What is against the spread? The spread?
Last week, 15-9-2. Pretty good week. What is that? About 57%, which doesn't seem like a lot, but if you know anything about Vegas or the betting lifestyle, if you hit 52, 53, if you're up in the 54, 55% range, you're in a pretty good spot. Not saying that, I'm the next, big thing, taking all the money from Vegas or anything like that, better X, but had a pretty good week last week. I will be doing all of the bowl games. So, there's a ton of them, but this week there is only one college football game, and it's a big one. So I'm going to cover that, and then of course I'm going to go through the NFL. So with this week, like I said, this week is dedicated to Army and Navy. If you watch college football, conference championship week is huge. The next week, there's one game on, and it's Army and Navy. And when I was researching this game, here's the thing. The craziest stat, to me anyway, came up when I was like, so here, I'll just read it because I can't even explain it. Army is 3-0 in games where they have 0 passing yards. 0. Not even 1. I don't understand. I understand. I can't wrap my head around almost how impressive that is. To the point where you know exactly what we're going to do every single play for 3 games, and they won. Now, even more impressive is they're not the only team to do that. And the only reason I know that, not that I went and looked at every team that's done that, but the team they're playing against, Navy, is 1-0 in games where they have 0 passing yards. So, this is almost my hope for this game. I hope we have 0 passes. Navy, they threw passes in their game. They just didn't get a completion. I want 0 passes. And I just want just a battle in the trenches. We're going to get that anyway because these are the top 2 rushing offenses. This game's always like that. It's always hard-hitting, hardcore, old-school football. That's what I want to see. I want to be, if there is a pass thrown, it better be like a swing pass to a running back or something like that. That I don't want, any downfield pass, anything like that. If I can see a game where there are 0 passing yards, I will be super happy just because I've never seen that before. So that stat kind of blew me away. Navy coming into the game is favored by 3.5 before I forget to do that. And the over-under is 46 for this game. The last 5 meetings, well, 5 of the last 6, not the last 5, have been decided by 1 score. So, 7, 8 points or less. Here's what's impressive about these offenses. Even though they don't throw the ball a lot or sometimes at all, they can score. I mean, they can put up points. Army has over 4,000 rushing yards, which is insane. They're going to put up points. Army and Navy. Right now, the way I look at this game, betting-wise, Army is a little bit better. Army is also playing better than Navy. So that's a lot of people are going to say, hey, then why is Navy favored by 3.5? Well, Navy has dominated the series. I'm pretty sure they're like 17-3 in the last 20 years. Also, Army hasn't beaten Navy in back-to-back years since 95-96. So that right there will put Navy as the favorite. This line might move under 3.5, which would make more sense. Navy still has the opportunity to win this game. They are having a down year, but they're still a good football team. I'm not going to bet the line on this game just because rivalry games are crazy, but I do think Army is playing better. But as I don't know if I've said it on the show, but I have been, known to say this. If the line doesn't make sense, Vegas knows something. If the line doesn't make sense, Vegas knows something. So Army's playing better. Navy's lost 4 or 5 or 5 of 6 or something like that. Having a little bit of a down year. Army's playing well. Army won the game last year. Games at a neutral site in Philadelphia. It doesn't make sense. So I would imagine that Vegas knows something. So that way I'm not going to play Army, even though I think they're going to win this one straight up. What I am going to do is I see the value in over 46. Like I said, they're going to run the ball a lot, but they can score points. This game could be easily in the high 50s. Easily. This could be a, 31-28 game. Or, 31-30 game for that matter. I would say over 46, I'm fairly confident is a good play here. So, it's tough for me to bet against Navy when they've had so much success. That's why I'm not doing that. And with the run, now that I'm thinking about it, the way that both teams run the ball, it's going to eat a lot of clock. You know what? I'm going to go with my gut and what I thought and what I've gone the whole time. Over 46. That's what I'm playing. I initially was thinking, maybe because of if teams get, 3 or 4 stops with the way they're going to eat the clock, it might go under. I don't think that's going to happen. I think both offenses are better than the opposite defense. So over 46 just makes sense here. Maybe a defensive play, special teams play, something like that makes the difference as well. So, yeah, we're going to go over. Let's move on to the NFL. So, there's some good games this week. I think New Orleans and Atlanta are going to be great. I think Minnesota, Carolina is going to be pretty good. Baltimore and Pittsburgh are going to be good. So let's run through these. So first, Thursday night, New Orleans versus Atlanta. I really like this New Orleans team. New Orleans is -1.5, and I think they're going to cover that. Let me go ahead and let's see. What else do we have? Let me go into Chicago at Cincinnati. Cincinnati's -6. I'm going to go Chicago +6. That's really weird to say, but I think Chicago +6 is the they're playing pretty well. Cincinnati's might be banged up. Short week against what they just played the Steelers. That could make it a little tougher. So I don't know. I think Chicago has an opportunity to maybe even go in there and win this game. Detroit at Tampa Bay. There's no line for this one yet, which is really weird. Unless it's not a pick'em. It's just there's just no line. So I'll pick this one straight up, and I will say Detroit. That's a pretty easy pick for me. Indianapolis and Buffalo. Also, there's no line for this one, which is again super weird. And I'm going to take. Oh boy. I will take Buffalo. It's at Buffalo. Indianapolis is going to play outside. I'll take Buffalo on that one. Oakland at Kansas City. Kansas City's favored by 4. So here's my thing with Kansas City. They are in trouble. And it's not looking good. They go home this week. So I picked them last time, and they let me down, and they lost to the Jets. So now that they're home, I don't know if they were home last week or not. I can't remember. I'm going to pick Kansas City to figure it out maybe. But I wouldn't count on it. Minnesota -2.5 at Carolina. I am super impressed with Minnesota and their defense. I'm going to take Minnesota. Green Bay -3.5 at Cleveland. I don't care who Green Bay has at quarterback this game. They are going to beat Cleveland. San Francisco at Houston. Houston -3. I'm taking San Francisco +3. Riding the Jimmy train. Jimmy G. Taking him +3. Dallas -4.5 at the New York Football Dumpster Fires, or the Giants if you are a fan. Dallas -4.5. Oh boy, both teams are not playing well, but Dallas is not nearly as bad as the Giants, so I'll take Dallas. Washington at the Chargers. I'll take the Chargers -6. Phillip Rivers, super impressed with his season this year. I'll take them at home. The Jets -1.5 at Denver. I will take the Jets -1.5. Denver looked horrendous last week. I mean horrendous. Giants worthy almost. Tennessee -3 at Arizona. I'm going to take Tennessee -3. Seattle at Jacksonville. Jacksonville -3. This game right here, I'm going to go Seattle +3, and I'm going to go Seattle straight up. I'm going to go Seattle to win the game, and here's why. This is when Seattle starts, stepping on the gas. They start playing really well this time of year. getting ready for the playoffs. Their defense starts looking better. Russell Wilson starts looking better. I think they're going to be a pretty solid team. And we saw it last week when they played Philly. I think they continue it this week, and they beat Jacksonville. Philly at the LA Rams. The Rams -2. I'm going to go Philly +2. This is just gut instinct. I don't know if Philly's gonna, I don't want to say fold, but come out flat because of their loss. But I think they come out, play pretty well, and come out and win this game outright. Baltimore at Pittsburgh. So I honestly would have taken Pittsburgh easily in this game. Baltimore's been playing pretty well. Saw them last week win pretty big. But I'm still going to go Pittsburgh here. -5, even though Shazier's out and everything like that. I don't think Antonio Brown's hurt. I don't really know. I didn't really look at that injury too much or the injury report. But I'm going to go Pittsburgh. I just think they're a better team. I think they're 1A, 1B with the Patriots in the AFC, and I hope that they play in we'll see week 15, that matchup, but I think in the playoffs, we're going to see them maybe AFC championship game, which will be really fun to watch. Speaking of the Patriots, New England Monday night, -11 at Miami. I am super impressed with the way the Patriots are playing right now, both offensively and defensively. No Gronk, which obviously hurts, but I don't think that's going to matter against this Miami team. I think they they win by a couple touchdowns. I don't want to say they cover by a couple touchdowns. That means they'll win by like 25, which is possible. But I think they win by a couple touchdowns. So that's the NFL quick run through, basically the rundown. Here's what to watch, guys. So not a lot of college football. Obviously, there's only one game, so it's a great game to tune into. Army, Navy, tune into that game, which will be Saturday. I don't even have to mention this, but I will. Sunday, watch the NFL. Thursday, obviously, watch New Orleans and Atlanta. So, obviously, you guys know that. Some college basketball. I know a lot of people don't really focus on it until either March Madness or until football season kind of starts wrapping up. But there's some good matchups now that we're seeing, and it starts Friday night with the Basketball Hall of Fame Classic. It's got some good matchups. 7-1 St. John's against number 16 and 7-0 Arizona State. Arizona State's a pretty good team, but St. John's has looked fairly solid. I wouldn't say good, but solid so far. Also Friday night, same tournament, 6-1 Oklahoma against number 25, 6-2 USC. USC has lost a couple games early. I thought they were going to be a little bit better than they are. I think they'll pick it up towards the end of the year. But they might have a tough matchup against Oklahoma. Oklahoma might walk away with a win here. And then to wrap up the Hall of Fame Classic is a classic. Number 22, 8-0 Nevada versus number 20, 8-0 TCU. Both undefeated, both really good teams. My gut says to go with TCU because I haven't seen Nevada play, but clearly they're doing something right if they got in the top 25. So that's going to be Friday night. Saturday night, college basketball, number 18 West Virginia at Pitt. And this isn't going to be a super close game, I don't think. I don't think Pitt's very good this year. But here's why you might want to watch this. I don't know how many people follow college football or college basketball, but back when these two were like in the Big East, this was a huge, the backyard brawl, a huge rivalry. And it gets pretty physical, pretty nasty. I don't know if it will get that way just because it's been a couple years now. I don't know if these kids kind of feel that way anymore. But it used to get crazy. The fans would get insane. I've been to a WVU Pitt basketball game at WVU. It was unbelievable. it does have the potential to get nasty. So it'll be fun. It's going to be a wild environment. Pitt is always a wild environment. And especially when WVU comes to town. So that's going to be a fun game just to watch, even if it doesn't get, overly physical or anything like that. Just the two teams playing against each other again and the atmosphere. It's going to be awesome. And then Sunday, Arizona State has a tough game against St. John's, and they got to come back Sunday and play number 2 Kansas. So, as I mentioned, St. John's, has looked pretty good. Arizona State might look ahead to this Kansas game and might slip up against St. John's. So you might see some value there in St. John's if you're betting that game. I don't know what the line is, but Arizona State might be looking forward to this matchup with the Jayhawks, who are if Duke wasn't doing what they're doing, Kansas is really good, and I would have them at number 1, obviously. So that's going to be a good game. I think Kansas is a much better team than Arizona State. But that is what to watch for. Guys, we're a couple weeks away from the new year. I got some big things planned for the show coming up in the new year. Obviously, stay tuned for all of the B.S.N shows, podcast, news. Follow us on all of the major social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I'm on there. BS Nerds are on there. I mean, we're all on there. And then, of course, if you're not subscribing and you're just listening, do yourself a favor and subscribe so you get all of the latest podcasts and right when they come out, because I know that's the best way to listen is first and foremost, right when they come out. Guys, have a great rest of your week and take care.